That morning started like any other at the office. 8 years of loyalty, dedication, and 12-hour days I thought they meant something. But when the conference room door clicked shut and I faced the new CEO's son across that polished table, everything changed. He took my job, my reputation, my peace of mind. What he didn't know was that I held a piece of information that could destroy everything his family had built. The Crawfords had made one fatal mistake. They'd underestimated me. My name is Emily Harper. And for 8 years, Skyline Dynamics was more than just a workplace. It was my second home. At 32, I'd climbed from junior recruiter to senior human resources manager, earning every promotion through late nights, weekend shifts, and an unwavering belief that hard work always pays off. How naive I was. The Chicago skyline stretched endlessly beyond my 14th floor office window, a maze of glass and steel that mirrored the corporate labyrinth I'd learned to navigate. Every morning, I'd arrive at 7 a.m. sharp, my heels clicking against the marble lobby floor, coffee in one hand, laptop bag in the other. The security guards knew me by name. The cleaning staff would wave as I passed. This was my kingdom, small as it might be. Everything changed the day Richard Crawford took over as CEO. The announcement came on a humid Tuesday in September. Our previous CEO had retired suddenly, health reasons, they said, and the board had moved swiftly to install Crawford, a Silicon Valley transplant with a reputation for aggressive restructuring. The all-hands meeting was packed, the air thick with anxiety and anticipation. Crawford stood at the podium, silver-haired and sharp-suited, promising innovation, growth, and a new era for Skyline Dynamics. Change is never easy, he'd said, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. But those willing to adapt will thrive. I remember thinking his words sounded rehearsed, corporate speak, designed to mask harder truths. But I pushed aside my doubts. After all, I'd weathered leadership changes before. The real shock came 3 weeks later when Andrew Crawford strutted into our offices, 28 years old, fresh from an MBA program that Daddy's money had undoubtedly greased his way through. Andrew was introduced as our new Deputy Director of Operations. The nepotism was so blatant it might have been comedic if it weren't so insulting. While the rest of us had spent years earning our positions, Andrew waltzed in with nothing but a surname and an attitude that suggested he owned the place, which, I suppose, he practically did. I first encountered him during a department head's meeting. He sat at his father's right hand, scrolling through his phone while we discussed quarterly projections. When I presented the HR budget, outlining critical hiring needs for our expanding tech division, Andrew finally looked up. "Seems excessive," he drawled, not even glancing at the carefully prepared slides. "We could probably cut this by 40%. "With respect," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "These positions are essential for the product launch timeline. We've already delayed twice due to understaffing." Andrew's eyes narrowed, a smirk playing at his lips. Maybe the problem isn't staffing. Maybe it's efficiency. When I was at Wharton, "The data supports Emily's assessment," interrupted Janet from finance. "Bless her." "The ROI projections." "I'm not interested in projections," Andrew cut her off. "I'm interested in results." The room fell silent. Richard Crawford said nothing, simply watching his son with what might have been pride or calculation with him. It was impossible to tell. That was the moment I knew Andrew Crawford would be trouble. What I didn't know was that he'd already marked me as his first target. Over the following weeks, Andrew inserted himself into every aspect of operations, particularly HR. He'd appear in my office unannounced, questioning decisions, demanding reports that served no purpose except to waste my time. He'd contradict me in meetings, undermine my authority with my team, and CC his father on emails highlighting any minor discrepancy he could find. The office atmosphere grew toxic. People whispered in break rooms, updated their resumes during lunch hours. The Skyline Dynamics, I'd known collaborative, innovative, respectful, was dying, replaced by something cold and paranoid. Yet, I persisted, believing that professionalism and results would speak louder than office politics. Another lesson in naivety. The city lights blurred past my window as I worked late again, trying to stay ahead of Andrew's constant demands. Chicago's pulse thrummed below sirens, horns, life continuing despite corporate drama. I should have been down there, living my life, maybe meeting friends at that new wine bar on Michigan Avenue. Instead, I was here, fighting a battle I didn't yet understand I'd already lost. The confrontation that sealed my fate happened on a gray Thursday morning in November. The quarterly review meeting was packed with senior staff, and I'd prepared meticulously for my presentation on the new performance evaluation system we'd been developing for 6 months. Andrew arrived 15 minutes late, designer coffee in hand, and took a seat directly across from me. His eyes held that familiar predatory gleam I'd learned to dread. "So," he interrupted before I could finish my second slide, "this new system seems unnecessarily complex. Why fix what isn't broken?" I took a breath, maintaining my composure. The current system hasn't been updated since 2018. Employee feedback indicates. Employee feedback. Andrew laughed, a sharp sound that cut through the room. "Since when do employees dictate company policy?" "Since we want to retain talent in a competitive market," I replied, feeling heat rise in my cheeks. "Our turnover rate has increased 30% Since when?" His voice dropped dangerously low. "Be specific, Emily." We both knew what he was implying. Since his father took over, since he'd arrived. The room tensed, everyone suddenly fascinated by their laptops or coffee cups. "The data is in the appendix," I said evenly. "Page 12 shows the correlation between employee satisfaction and—" "I don't need a lecture on correlations from an HR manager," Andrew snapped. "This whole presentation is a waste of time. We're not implementing this system." Something inside me snapped. 8 years of biting my tongue, of playing politics, of watching incompetent men fail upward while dedicated employees suffered, it all crystallized in that moment. "With respect, Andrew, you haven't even reviewed the material. This system could save the company $2 million annually in recruitment costs alone. But I suppose that requires actually understanding HR beyond whoever helped you pass your MBA classes." The silence was deafening. Richard Crawford, who'd been silent until now, slowly turned his gaze to me. Andrew's face had gone from pale to crimson. "I think we need to discuss your future here, Emily," Andrew said, his voice eerily calm. "My office. Now." The walk to his office felt like a death march. My colleagues avoided eye contact as I passed. The city view from Andrew's corner office, one that should have belonged to someone with actual experience, mocked me with its grandeur. "You know," Andrew said, settling behind his massive desk, "I was going to do this gracefully, give you time to transition. But that little display, that disrespect," he shook his head. "We're restructuring the HR department, effective immediately. Your position has been eliminated." "You can't do this," I said, though we both knew he could. "I have contracts, protection against wrongful termination." He smiled. "This is restructuring, purely business. You'll receive the standard severance package, of course, 2 weeks' pay. Your access will be revoked within the hour. 2 weeks after 8 years. Be grateful it's not nothing." He leaned back, savoring the moment. "Security will escort you to clear your desk. Oh. And Emily, I'd be careful about what you say about Skyline Dynamics or the Crawford family. Our legal team is quite aggressive about protecting our reputation." The humiliation burned as I packed my desk under the watchful eye of security. 8 years reduced to a cardboard box, my awards. A plant that had somehow survived the fluorescent lighting. A coffee mug declaring me world's best boss, a gift from my team last Christmas. My hands shook as I removed my company ID badge, the photo showing a younger, more optimistic version of myself. The elevator ride down felt endless. Each floor we passed represented memories: the 3rd floor where I'd conducted my first interview, the 7th where I'd celebrated my promotion, the 10th where I'd worked 60-hour weeks to implement the diversity initiative that won us industry recognition. The November wind hit me like a slap when I exited onto LaSalle Street. Office workers streamed past, oblivious to my personal catastrophe. The security guard handed me my box with something that might have been sympathy in his eyes. "Take care, Ms. Harper," he said quietly. "You were one of the good ones." As I stood there, box in arms, watching the building that had been my second home tower above me, I felt something shift. The humiliation began to crystallize into something harder, sharper. Andrew Crawford thought he'd destroyed me. He thought his family name and wealth made him untouchable. He had no idea what he'd just started. The first week of unemployment hit like a freight train. I'd wake at 6:30 a.m. out of habit, reach for my phone to check emails, then remember there were no emails, no meetings to prepare for, no team to manage, just silence and the weight of bills that wouldn't stop coming. My Lincoln Park apartment, once a symbol of my success, now felt like a prison. Rent was $2,800 a month. My savings could cover maybe 3 months if I was careful. The severance check those insulting 2 weeks would barely make a dent. I spent hours at my laptop, updating my resume, reaching out to contacts, applying for positions I was overqualified for. The responses were swift and devastating. "We've decided to go with another candidate. The position has been filled internally. We don't feel you'd be the right cultural fit." By the third week, I noticed a pattern. Interviews would go well until they asked about my previous employer. The moment I mentioned Skyline Dynamics, something would shift in their eyes. Phone interviews would end abruptly. In-person meetings would wrap up with hollow promises to be in touch. My friend Marcus, who worked at a competing firm, finally told me the truth over drinks at a River North bar. "Emily, word on the street is you're difficult to work with. That you created a hostile environment at Skyline." He couldn't meet my eyes. "Andrew Crawford has been making calls." "That's illegal," I said, gripping my wine glass so hard I thought it might shatter. "Prove it." Marcus replied, "It's all informal, golf course conversations, LinkedIn messages that disappear. You know how this works." I did know. The Chicago tech scene was smaller than it looked from the outside. A few whispers from someone with the Crawford name could destroy a career. My boyfriend, Daniel, tried to be supportive at first. He'd bring takeout, tell me everything would work out, that I was too talented to keep down. But as weeks turned into a month, his patience wore thin. "Maybe you should consider other fields," he suggested one night as we sat in my apartment, the TV playing something neither of us was watching. "Or move to another city, start fresh." "This is my home," I said. "My career. I'm not letting them chase me away." He sighed. That particular sigh I'd been hearing more often. "Emily, you're obsessed. All you talk about is Andrew Crawford and Skyline. It's not healthy. They destroyed my life, Daniel. You're destroying your life by not moving on." We broke up 2 days later. He texted me that he needed space, that my negative energy was affecting his own career. 8 months together ended with a text message. My parents, calling from their Florida retirement community, oscillated between concern and subtle disappointment. "Maybe this is a sign," my mother said during one particularly painful call. "You're 32, sweetheart. Maybe it's time to think about settling down, starting a family." I had a career, Mom, a successful one. "Had," she repeated, past tense. Even my sister, Sarah, usually my strongest supporter, seemed to distance herself. Our weekly coffee dates became bi-weekly, then monthly. She'd make excuses busy with the kids. Her husband's job was demanding. But I knew the truth. Failure was contagious in our social circles. Being seen with the woman who'd been blacklisted by the Crawfords was a liability. By week 6, I'd stopped leaving the apartment except for essential groceries. The mirror showed someone I barely recognized, hollow eyes, unwashed hair, wearing the same Northwestern sweatshirt for the 4th day straight. The unemployment checks were a joke compared to my expenses. I'd started calculating which bills I could skip, how long before utilities were shut off, whether I could swallow my pride and ask my parents for money. Late one night, scrolling through LinkedIn and torturing myself by viewing Andrew Crawford's posts about transforming skyline dynamics through innovative leadership, I found myself typing his name into Google. Article after article praising the Crawford business dynasty. Richard's rise from humble beginnings, a narrative I now suspected was heavily sanitized. Andrew's bright future, his engagement to a senator's daughter, his philanthropic efforts, it was all so perfect, so untouchable. That's when something inside me shifted. The despair didn't disappear, but it transformed, crystallizing into something with edges sharp enough to cut. They'd taken everything from me: my job, my reputation, my relationship, my self-worth. They'd done it casually, carelessly, like stepping on an ant. But ants are survivors. They're patient. They find ways into places that seem impenetrable. Sitting in my dark apartment, city lights glittering beyond windows I could no longer afford, I made a decision. I wouldn't just survive this. I wouldn't quietly disappear like they expected. The Crawfords had made me their enemy. It was time to learn everything I could about them. The coffee shop in Wicker Park was nearly empty when I met Tom Brennan, a former Skyline Dynamics accountant who'd been restructured 6 months before me. He'd reached out through LinkedIn after seeing my status change to Seeking Opportunities code for unemployed in our industry. "Emily Harper," he said, sliding into the booth across from me. "I wondered when Crawford Jr. would come for you. You actually stood up to him." Tom looked terrible, gaunt, unshaven, wearing a Cubs jacket that had seen better days. But his eyes were sharp, alert. "How are you managing?" I asked. "Uber driving, mostly. Gig economy stuff." He laughed bitterly. 15 years in corporate finance, and now I'm driving drunk millennials home from Wrigleyville. "I'm sorry, Tom." "Don't be sorry. Be smart." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "You want to know why I was really fired?" My pulse quickened. It wasn't restructuring. I found discrepancies, big ones. Money moving through shell companies, offshore accounts in the Caymans, classic washing machine operation. He pulled out a flash drive, sliding it across the table. I kept copies before they locked me out. "Tom, this is dangerous, yeah, but I've got nothing left to lose. Wife left, took the kids to her mother's in Milwaukee, lost the house in Naperville." His hands shook as he lifted his coffee. "The Crawfords didn't just fire me, Emily. They destroyed me. Made sure I'd never work in finance again." I pocketed the flash drive. "Why didn't you go to the authorities?" With what proof everything I had was circumstantial. Besides, you know who Richard Crawford plays golf with: the state attorney, half the financial oversight board, judges who've been attending his fundraisers for years. That night, I spread Tom's files across my living room floor. Financial statements, wire transfer records, emails with coded language about special projects and alternative revenue streams. It was like looking at a puzzle with half the pieces missing. But the shape was clear. The Crawfords were dirty. The real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. My neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, knocked on my door with a package that had been misdelivered. "That handsome young man was looking for you earlier," she said. "The one in the expensive suit." My blood ran cold. What did he look like? Tall, dark hair, drove one of those Tesla cars, said he was a friend from work. I hadn't told anyone outside my closest circle where I lived. After Mrs. Rodriguez left, I noticed things my mail had been rifled through. The lock on the building's entrance showed scratches that weren't there before. They were watching me. Instead of fear, I felt validation. If I was worth watching, I was on to something. I started investigating more systematically. Public records showed Richard Crawford's companies had a web of subsidiaries, many registered in Delaware and Nevada states with notoriously opaque corporate laws. Property records revealed purchases that didn't align with reported income. But the most interesting discovery came from social media. Andrew Crawford's Instagram was a treasure trove of excess private jets, yacht parties, clubs where bottles cost more than most people's monthly salary. But it was a photo from 3 years ago that stopped me cold. Andrew at a college party, his arm around a young woman who looked uncomfortable, almost frightened. The comments had been disabled, but reverse image searching led me to a deleted Reddit thread. Princeton senior sexually assaults freshman at frat party university, covers it up. The thread was gone, but the Wayback Machine had preserved fragments, testimonies from students, mentions of a substantial donation to the university shortly after the incident, the victim's sudden transfer to another school with a full scholarship paid for by an anonymous benefactor. I cross-referenced dates. Richard Crawford had donated $5 million to Princeton that same month. My phone rang at 2 a.m. Unknown number. "Stop digging," a voice said. Male, disguised with some kind of modulator. "This is your only warning." "Who is this?" "Someone who knows what happened to the last person who looked into the Crawfords." Tom Brennan isn't the first accountant to have an accident. Accident Tom's alive. His predecessor isn't. Car crash, very tragic, stop now, or join him. The line went dead. I sat in the dark, heart pounding. They were threatening me, which meant I was close to something they desperately wanted hidden. I thought about Tom, driving Uber to survive, about my empty bank account, about Andrew's smug face as he destroyed my career, about that girl in the photo, transferred away with hush money. The smart move was to stop. The safe move was to leave Chicago, start over somewhere else, forget the Crawfords existed. But I was done being smart and safe. They'd taken everything from me except my anger, and that had crystallized into something they should have feared more than any regulatory investigation. Purpose? The Chicago Tribune building stood like a beacon against the gray December sky. I'd spent 3 days researching investigative journalists before settling on Sarah Jennings. She'd broken the Alderman Walsh bribery scandal, exposed pharmaceutical price fixing, and most importantly, she had a reputation for protecting sources. "Emily Harper," she said when we met at a cafe near Millennium Park. "I know who you are. Andrew Crawford's been spreading quite the narrative about you." Sarah was younger than I'd expected, maybe 35, with sharp eyes behind designer glasses and an energy that suggested she survived on coffee and ambition. "Then why agree to meet?" I asked. "Because Crawford's story doesn't add up. You don't work somewhere for 8 years, win multiple excellence awards, then suddenly become a toxic liability." She pulled out a recorder. "May I?" "Off the record first." She nodded, leaving the recorder off. "What do you have?" I slid her a folder copies of Tom's financial documents, the Princeton incident research, property records. She flipped through, her expression growing more interested with each page. "This is good, but it's not enough," she said finally. "The financial stuff needs forensic accounting to verify. The Princeton incident that's hearsay without the victim's testimony. I need something concrete, something that directly links the Crawfords to criminal activity." "What if I could get it?" Sarah studied me. "That could be dangerous. My last source who went after a family this powerful ended up..." She stopped. "Let's just say they moved to Canada for their health. I'm already being followed, already getting threats." I met her gaze. "They've already taken everything. What else can they do?" "Kill you," Sarah said bluntly. "Make it look like suicide. Desperate unemployed woman, history of mental health issues suddenly appearing in your medical records." She leaned forward. "If you do this, you need to be smart. Document everything, multiple copies in multiple locations, and create a dead man's switch." "A what?" "Automated system that releases everything if something happens to you, insurance." Over the next 2 weeks, Sarah taught me investigative journalism 101, how to use encrypted communications, how to record conversations legally in Illinois' one-party consent state. Thankfully, how to back up evidence across multiple cloud services. Meanwhile, I worked on getting closer to the source. I created a fake identity, Rebecca Collins, freelance event planner. Used my remaining credit to buy appropriate clothes, business cards, a professional website. Then I started networking at the places Andrew Crawford frequented, the Chicago Athletic Association, RPM Italian, the private clubs along the Gold Coast. It was at a charity fundraiser for Lincoln Park Zoo that I made my breakthrough. Andrew was there with his fiancée, Melissa, the senator's daughter, a beautiful woman who looked perpetually medicated. I watched them work the room, noticed how she flinched when he touched her, how her smile never reached her eyes. When Andrew stepped away to take a call, I approached her at the bar. Melissa, I'm Rebecca Collins. I absolutely loved the cancer research benefit you organized last spring. Her face brightened slightly, the first genuine expression I'd seen. Oh, thank you. That was a passion project. We talked for 10 minutes about charity work, Chicago social scene, carefully avoiding anything about Andrew. As I was about to leave, she grabbed my arm. Be careful around him, she whispered, glancing where Andrew was returning. He's not what he seems. Our eyes met. In hers, I saw recognition. She knew I wasn't who I claimed to be. But instead of exposing me, she slipped her card into my hand. Call me. About planning events. Andrew appeared, sliding his arm around Melissa possessively. Making friends. Darling. Rebecca was admiring the cancer benefit, Melissa said smoothly. She's an event planner. Andrew's eyes swept over me dismissively. I'd altered my appearance enough: darker hair, different makeup, designer glasses that he didn't recognize the HR manager he'd destroyed. Charity work, he scoffed. Melissa's little hobby. The condescension in his voice made my skin crawl, but I smiled pleasantly and excused myself. That night, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. But the text was clear. Atrium Cafe, Art Institute. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. Come alone. M. Melissa was already there when I arrived, sitting beneath the glass ceiling, winter light filtering through. She looked fragile, expensive, and desperate. I know who you are, Emily, she said without preamble, and I want to help you destroy him. My heart stopped. I don't know what you... Please. She pulled out her phone, showed me a photo, her face bruised and swollen. 3 weeks ago, the engagement photos were scheduled for the next day. His father paid off the photographer, the makeup artist, everyone who saw. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled. I have recordings, videos, financial documents he keeps in his home safe, evidence of what they did at Princeton, what they're still doing. Why don't you leave? My father is Senator Williams. His career depends on Crawford money. If I leave, if I talk, they'll destroy him too. She met my eyes. But if someone else exposes them first? She slid a key across the table. Storage unit in Elmhurst. Everything's there. I've been collecting evidence for 2 years, waiting for someone brave enough to use it. Brave or stupid? Both, she said with a sad smile. But you're also angry enough to see this through. I can see it in your eyes, the same rage I see in my mirror every morning. As she stood to leave, she paused. The Crawford Foundation Gala is next week. Everyone who matters will be there. If you're going to strike, that's your stage. Walking home through the frozen streets, the key burning in my pocket, I realized this had become bigger than just my revenge. This was about Tom, about Melissa, about that Princeton girl, about everyone the Crawfords had crushed beneath their designer shoes. Sarah was right, this was dangerous. But I was past caring. I had my weapon now. Time to prepare for war. The Crawford Foundation Gala was Chicago's event of the season. 500 guests at the Drake Hotel. Tickets at $5,000 per plate. Everyone who mattered in Chicago's business and political circles under one gilded roof. Getting in should have been impossible for someone like me, blacklisted, broke, and burning with revenge. But Melissa had thought of everything. My invitation came under Rebecca Collins, event consultant, supposedly evaluating the gala for a West Coast client. The dress came from Melissa too, a black Valentino that made me look like I belonged among the elite. Sarah Jennings was already inside, officially covering the event for the Tribune Society pages. We'd spent the week preparing, turning Melissa's evidence into a devastating presentation. Financial fraud, money laundering through Caribbean shells, the Princeton assault cover-up, 3 other victims who'd been paid for silence, and the crown jewel video footage of Richard Crawford explicitly discussing bribing city officials for the Millennium Park development deal. The plan was precise. At 9 p.m., during Richard's speech about philanthropic responsibility, everything would appear on the ballroom's massive projection screens. Sarah had a tech contact who'd hacked into the hotel's AV system. I would be recording the crowd's reaction while Sarah captured the Crawford's response. By morning, it would be front-page news and viral across social media. I arrived at 7:30, my hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. The ballroom was spectacular: crystal chandeliers, gold accents, ice sculptures that cost more than most people's monthly rent. I recognized faces from Chicago's power structure aldermen, judges, CEOs, even the governor's chief of staff. Andrew stood near the bar, Melissa on his arm like an accessory. She wore long sleeves despite the warmth hiding bruises. I knew. Our eyes met briefly across the room. The slightest nod told me she was ready. Champagne. A server appeared at my elbow. I accepted, needing something to hold, to look natural. Richard Crawford was holding court near the stage, surrounded by admirers and sycophants. He looked invincible in his custom tuxedo. Silver hair, perfectly styled, smile, practiced, and cold. At 8:45, I positioned myself near the side exit, phone ready. Sarah was by the press section. Melissa had excused herself to the ladies' room. She didn't want to be standing next to Andrew when his world imploded. 8:55. Richard Crawford took the stage to applause. The lights dimmed, focusing attention on him. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight. The Crawford Foundation has always believed in giving back to the city that gave us so much. I almost laughed at the irony. Giving back what they'd stolen, perhaps. 8:58. My heart hammered against my ribs. Sarah caught my eye, nodded. 8:59. Richard was building to his crescendo about integrity and leadership. 9. Nothing happened. Richard continued speaking. The screens remained showing the Crawford Foundation logo. I looked at Sarah, saw my panic reflected in her face. Then Andrew's voice cut through the darkness, from speakers throughout the ballroom. You really thought you could destroy us, Emily. The lights snapped on. Andrew stood at the AV control booth, microphone in hand. Security guards appeared at every exit. My blood turned to ice. Ladies and gentlemen, Andrew announced, his voice dripping satisfaction. I apologize for the disruption, but we have a situation. Emily Harper, a disturbed former employee, has attempted to sabotage tonight's event with fabricated evidence and lies. Every head turned toward me. Hundreds of eyes, judging, condemning. The woman you see there, Andrew continued, was terminated for embezzlement and inappropriate conduct. Rather than accept responsibility, she's orchestrated this pathetic revenge scheme. That's not, I started, but security was already moving toward me. Richard took the microphone. We've already contacted the authorities about Ms. Harper's criminal activities, forging documents, identity theft, conspiracy to commit fraud. Tom Brennan has already been arrested as her accomplice. Tom. My stomach dropped. Even my own fiancé. Andrew's voice cracked with practiced emotion. Was manipulated by this woman's lies. Melissa has been under tremendous stress, suffering from delusions. We're getting her the help she needs. I saw Melissa then, being escorted out by two men who weren't security medical personnel. She was fighting them, but discreetly, hopelessly. They'd made her the crazy one. Made me the villain. The evidence, I shouted as security reached me. Check the storage unit, check the... Already cleared out, Andrew said into the microphone, his smile visible, even from across the room. Did you really think Melissa could hide anything from me I've known about her little collection for months? Waiting for the right moment to clean house. As security gripped my arms, I saw Sarah in the press section, her face pale. She mouthed, I'm sorry. Then she turned away. They'd gotten to her too. Threatened her, bought her, or both. Ladies and gentlemen, Richard's voice boomed as I was dragged toward the exit. Please, enjoy your evening. We won't let one disturbed individual ruin our celebration of Chicago's bright future. The last thing I saw before the ballroom doors closed was Andrew raising his champagne glass in my direction, a toast to my complete and utter destruction. The security guard shoved me onto the street where police cars waited, lights flashing. As they pushed me into the back seat, I realized the Crawfords hadn't just won, they'd turned my own weapon against me. Every piece of evidence would be painted as forgery. Every ally would be discredited or silenced. But as the police car pulled away, I remembered something Melissa had whispered that day at the Art Institute. I make copies of everything, multiple copies. The Crawfords thought they'd found everything in that storage unit. They thought they'd won. They were wrong. The charges didn't stick. They couldn't because beneath their arrogance, the Crawfords had made a critical error. They'd underestimated Melissa Williams, senator's daughter, abused fiancé, and the smartest person in any room she entered. I was released after 48 hours when their evidence of my embezzlement fell apart under scrutiny. My lawyer, unexpectedly paid for by an anonymous benefactor, tore through their accusations. No missing funds, no forged documents they could actually produce, just allegations that dissolved like tissue paper in rain. But the damage was done. My name was poisoned now, splashed across every Chicago paper alongside words like disturbed and vengeful. I returned to my apartment to find an eviction notice. My remaining friends had distanced themselves completely. Even Tom had vanished released, but terrified into silence. Then the package arrived, no return address. Inside, a burner phone and a single text. Check your email. M. The email account I'd created for Rebecca Collins contained one message, a video file. It was Melissa, recording herself in what looked like a hotel room. Her face was bruised, but determined. If you're watching this, Emily, it means they think they've won. They committed me to a private facility yesterday diagnosis, delusional disorder with persecution complex. My father agreed to it. Andrew has power of attorney now. She held up a flash drive to the camera. But I learned from the best my dear fiancé himself. Always have insurance. This drive contains everything from my real collection, not the decoys in the storage unit, account numbers for the Cayman Islands, the Princeton victim's sworn affidavit she's safe in London now, and something even Andrew doesn't know exists recordings from his father's study. Richard liked to record his insurance on business partners. He never knew I found his system. She leaned closer to the camera. There's a FedEx location on North Wells, Box 471 paid for through a shell company. The key is taped under the sink in the women's bathroom at the Chicago Theater. Second stall. They'll never trace it to either of us. The video continued with detailed instructions, then ended with Melissa looking directly into the camera. Destroy them, Emily. For both of us. For all of us. I retrieved the drive that night. The contents were beyond anything I'd imagined. Richard Crawford hadn't just recorded conversations for insurance, he'd recorded crimes. Explicit discussions of murdering a union leader who wouldn't play ball. Plans to burn down a competitor's warehouse. And Andrew, sweet Andrew, caught on his father's hidden cameras assaulting not one, but 3 different women in the study, including Melissa. But I couldn't go to Sarah Jennings, she'd been compromised. The police were watched by Crawford allies. I needed someone beyond their reach. That's when I remembered Margaret Chen, no relation, despite the name, a federal prosecutor from the Southern District of Illinois. She'd been circling the Crawfords for years, but could never find enough evidence. Her number was in Melissa's files. We met at dawn in Grant Park, the city still sleeping around us. This is enough to bury them, Margaret said after reviewing the evidence. But if I move officially, they'll know. They have sources in my office. Then leak it, I said. Everywhere. So many places they can't contain it. She shook her head. That could compromise prosecution. We need to do this right. She studied me. Unless what? Unless they're forced to expose themselves, very publicly, in a way they can't deny or spin. The plan we hatched was dangerous, requiring me to return to the lion's den. But I was beyond fear now. The Crawfords had taken everything except my will to see them fall. The next Crawford Foundation board meeting was in 3 days. Using information from Melissa's files, I knew Richard kept the most damaging evidence in a private server in his office, his insurance against his own conspirators. If that server's contents went public during a board meeting, with witnesses and media present, Margaret could arrange for federal agents to be nearby. I just had to get in, trigger the release, and survive long enough for the cavalry to arrive. "You could die," Margaret said bluntly. "Then they'd better make it look really convincing," I replied, "because everyone will be watching." The night before the meeting, I stood at my apartment window, looking out at the Chicago skyline. Somewhere in those towers, the Crawfords slept soundly, believing they'd won. Tom was in hiding, Melissa was locked away, Sarah had been silenced. But I was still standing, bruised, battered, stripped of everything but standing. Tomorrow, the Crawfords would learn what happened when you took everything from someone. You left them with nothing to lose and everything to gain. The phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Second stall. Maintenance uniform. 7 a.m. Building blueprints attached. Good luck. Even locked away, Melissa was still fighting. We all were, in our own ways. Tomorrow, the empire would fall. And unlike Caesar, the Crawfords wouldn't even see the knife coming until it was too late. The maintenance uniform fit perfectly. Melissa had thought of everything, even down to the fake ID that would get me past security. At 7 a.m. sharp, I entered the Skyline Dynamics building through the service entrance, my heart steady despite what lay ahead. The board meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. Richard's office server would auto-sync with the presentation system at 9:15. I just needed to upload the files and trigger the protocol Melissa had discovered. Then every screen in the boardroom would display the truth. I reached the executive floor at 7:45, empty, as expected. The Crawfords always arrived fashionably late to their own meetings. Richard's office was locked, but Melissa's key card hidden in the uniform pocket opened it smoothly. The server hummed in the corner, an unassuming black box containing enough secrets to destroy half of Chicago's elite. I plugged in the drive, began the upload. 5 minutes. 10. 15. I knew you'd come. I spun around. Andrew stood in the doorway, but he was alone. No security. His face wasn't triumphant. It was tired. "Melissa told me everything," he said quietly. From her hospital bed, the drugs loosened her tongue. My hand moved to my pocket where the pepper spray waited. "Don't," he said. "I'm not here to stop you." "Why?" He laughed bitterly. "Because I'm tired of being his son, tired of cleaning up his messes, tired of becoming him." He moved to the window, looking out at the city. "Did you know the Princeton girl was my girlfriend before I became what he wanted? He paid her off, then congratulated me for handling it like a Crawford. You still did it. You still hurt her, hurt Melissa." "Yes," he said simply. "And I'll pay for that. But at least I can choose how." He pulled out his phone, showed me the screen, a live stream, the boardroom, filling with board members, investors, media for the quarterly announcement. "I've been streaming from Dad's office for the last 10 minutes, he said. "Your upload, our conversation, all of it, 20,000 viewers and climbing." My phone buzzed. Margaret federal agents en route, saw the stream, brilliant. The door burst open. Richard Crawford stood there, face purple with rage. "Andrew, what have you?" He stopped, seeing me. Then the computer screen showing the upload complete. Then Andrew's phone, still streaming. "It's over, Dad," Andrew said quietly. "All of it." Richard lunged for the computer, but it was too late. Down the hall, we could hear commotion from the boardroom. Shouts, chaos, the sound of phones ringing incessantly. "You ungrateful!" Richard grabbed Andrew by the throat, but federal agents flooded the room. "Richard Crawford, you're under arrest for money laundering, conspiracy, bribery." The list went on. Andrew was arrested too, accepting the handcuffs without resistance. As they led him past me, he paused. "I'm sorry," he said. "For what it's worth." "It's not worth much," I replied. "But it's a start." The next hours blurred together. Statements to federal agents. Sarah Jennings appearing, tears in her eyes, apologizing they'd threatened her daughter. But she'd been feeding information to Margaret secretly. Tom emerged from hiding. Melissa was released from the facility. Her father's career destroyed, but her freedom restored. By evening, it was the only story on every network. The Crawford empire crumbled in real time. Stock prices plummeted. Associates distanced themselves. The family name became synonymous with corruption. I stood in Margaret's office, watching the news coverage. "You did it," she said. "You brought down the Crawfords." "We did it," I corrected. "All of us who refused to stay silent." "What will you do now?" I thought about it. My reputation was destroyed but also reborn. The woman who brought down the Crawfords. Job offers were already coming in from firms that valued that kind of courage. "First, I'm going to sleep for a week," I said. "Then, maybe I'll start a consultancy, helping other whistleblowers. God knows there are enough Crawfords out there." 6 months later, I walked past the Skyline Dynamics building now under new management, renamed, rebuilt. Andrew was serving 5 years reduced for cooperation. Richard got 25. Melissa was in law school, channeling her trauma into advocacy. The city had moved on to new scandals, new villains. But for those of us who'd lived through the Crawford storm, the scars remained not as wounds, but as reminders. I'd lost everything and found something more valuable, the knowledge that even the most powerful could fall when ordinary people refused to stay silent. The Crawfords had created their own destruction by underestimating those they'd crushed. Standing there, watching the Chicago River flow past, I finally felt it, peace. Not happiness, not yet. But peace. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, Ms. Harper. "My boss is destroying my life. I have evidence. Can you help?" I smiled, typing back, "Yes, let's bring them down." The Crawfords were gone, but my war against workplace tyrants had just begun. And this time, I wasn't fighting alone. In the distance, the Chicago skyline glittered with promise and threat in equal measure. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I'd already survived the worst. Now, it was time to help others do the same. Thank you so much for listening to this story of revenge, redemption, and justice. I hope Emily's journey resonated with you. Where are you listening from? I'd love to connect with listeners from around the world. Drop a comment below and let me know. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts about what you'd do in Emily's situation. Your support means everything, and I can't wait to share the next story with you.